I never thought I'd catch my wife of 15 years selling our beach house right from under me until her champagne-laced voice echoed through the phone from Brussels, laughing about her fresh start with her trainer. What Rachel didn't realize was that after 2 decades as a commercial property negotiator, I transferred our $1.02 million oceanfront paradise into a 9-cut living trust months earlier, a detail she would have noticed had she bothered reading what she so carelessly signed. I grew up watching my father lose everything in bad property deals, watching the toll each mistake took on him as he'd pore over contracts at our kitchen table late into the night, legal pads scattered around him like fallen soldiers. By 16, I could spot a liability clause from across the room. By 22, I'd graduated top of my class with a focus on commercial real estate law. That meticulous attention to detail became my superpower in Jacksonville's competitive property market. The name Ethan Morgan meant something in commercial real estate circles. If Morgan's on the deal, the paperwork's certed, that was what people said. I built my reputation one carefully vetted contract at a time, finding value where others saw only standard boilerplate. My colleagues called me the fine print king, and I wore that crown proudly. Rachel and I met at the Florida Real Estate Expo in Orlando 15 years ago. I still remember how she commanded attention in the crisp navy suit, a presentation on luxury property marketing drawing the largest crowd of the conference. When our eyes met across that hotel ballroom, something electric passed between us. Later, as we shared overpriced cocktails at the hotel bar, she teased me about my obsessive devotion to paperwork. Most men bring flowers on the first date, she laughed when I showed up with color-coded folders analyzing our compatibility. You bring a risk assessment. 3 years into our marriage, we found the Amelia Island property, a weathered oceanfront cottage with peeling paint and endless potential. The moment we stepped onto that wraparound porch, Rachel squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is it, Ethan. This is our forever place." Weekends became sacred. We'd drive out from Jacksonville Friday evenings, windows down, Rachel's playlist filling the car with music as salt air gradually replaced city smog. Saturday mornings, I'd wake at dawn to catch the sunrise from the deck, 2 mugs of coffee steaming in the cool morning air. Rachel would eventually emerge, hair tousled from sleep, wrapping her arms around my waist as we watched dolphins break the surface of the Atlantic. "How did we get so lucky?" she'd murmur against my shoulder. We renovated room by room, arguing over paint colors, laughing when we accidentally knocked down a non-load bearing wall, and making love on drop cloths surrounded by the scent of fresh paint. With each improvement, the house became more permanent, a testament to what we were building together. I never saw the shift coming. Maybe I was too focused on the Rogers Commercial Plaza deal, working late nights as Rachel started spending more time at that new gym downtown. "You have your passion," she'd say, kissing my cheek before heading out in workout clothes that grew increasingly expensive, and now I found mine. Her trainer Jason was 35, with the kind of carefully sculpted physique that spoke of hours in the gym and a diet I couldn't begin to understand. Rachel brought him to our holiday party last year. I remember shaking his hand, his grip unnecessarily firm as Rachel beamed beside him. "Jason's helped me reconnect with my body," she'd explained, something unfamiliar flickering behind her eyes. "You should try a session, Ethan, might help with your back pain." But I noticed how her weekend fitness retreats grew more frequent. How she'd return home with a glow that had nothing to do with exercise. How her phone would buzz at odd hours, and she'd take calls on the deck, voice lowered against the crash of waves. I started reviewing our finances, another habit Rachel had once teased me about. The joint account withdrawals told their own story, boutique hotel charges in Savannah when she was supposedly at a women's wellness weekend in Atlanta. Meals for 2 at restaurants I'd never heard of. A weekend rental car when her Audi was supposedly in the shop. The man who built his career on noticing details had missed the most important ones in his own marriage. The night I transferred our beach house into the living trust, Rachel was at another training session. I sat alone at our kitchen island, carefully signing each page of the trust documents my attorney had prepared. It wasn't revenge, not yet. Just protection. Just insurance. Some primal instinct whispering that I needed to secure what mattered most. When she returned home that night, flushed and distracted, I asked her to sign some routine paperwork for our portfolio. She barely glanced at the documents, scrawling her signature where I'd placed the sticky tabs. "Don't you want to read what you're signing?" I asked, something hollow opening in my chest. "I trust you, Ethan," she'd said with a dismissive laugh, already checking her phone. "You're the paperwork genius, remember?" As I watched her walk away, I wondered when exactly I'd become nothing more than a signature at the bottom of a page in the story of our marriage. The first hint came on a Wednesday, a Federal Express envelope delivered to my office that wasn't supposed to be for me at all. My assistant Megan had signed for it, not realizing the package contained closing documents for our beach house. Our beach house that wasn't for sale. "Mr. Morgan, I think there's been some mistake," she said, placing the envelope on my desk with a concerned frown. "These look like sale documents for your Amelia Island property." I stared at the papers, my stomach dropping as I flipped through preliminary closing documents for a property I had no intention of selling. The buyer's name leapt off the page like a slap to the face, Robert Maxwell. Jason's brother. My hands went cold as I dialed Rachel. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. 3 hours later, I sat in Brett Harrison's office, my attorney of 20 years, watching his face darken as he examined the documents. He struggled to find the words, unprecedented. She has no legal authority to initiate the sale. The trust documentation is anklet. They're selling it for $850, I said, my voice hollow. The appraisal last year came in at $1.2 million. Brett's eyebrows shot up. A fire sale to family at $350,000 below market. Ethan, this isn't just betrayal, this is conspiracy. I nodded slowly, a strange calm settling over me. I need to know everything, how deep this goes. The next morning, Brett called with news that made me pull my car to the shoulder of Atlantic Boulevard, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went wide. We pulled Rachel's financial records per your authorization on the joint account, he said, his voice grim. Ethan, she's methodically withdrawn nearly $170,000 over the past 11 months, small amounts, irregular patterns to avoid triggering alerts. I closed my eyes, remembering the beach house renovation money we'd been saving. The fund for the commercial property expansion I'd been planning. Done. There's more, Brett continued. She signed a commercial lease agreement for a retail space in Savannah 3 months ago. Both her name and Jason's are on the paperwork. It's for a fitness studio. The betrayal crashed over me like the Atlantic swells during hurricane season, violent, destructive, unstoppable. Our life savings drained to fund her escape with her lover. Our dream home sold out from under me to his brother at a criminal discount. That night I drove to our beach house, my beach house, and sat on the deck alone, watching the moonlight dance across the waves. The place where Rachel and I had once whispered dreams to each other was now currency in her escape plan. I traced my fingers over the railing we'd sanded together, remembering how she'd kiss sawdust from my cheek. My phone buzzed with a text from Brett, found incorporation documents for MaxFit Studios LLC filed 2 months ago. Rachel listed as 40% owner, Jason as 60%. Business plan projects using $225,000 startup capital, source listed as personal investment and property liquidation. The pieces look into terrible place. Fitness retreats. The late night phone calls. The careless signatures on documents she never bothered to read. All building to this moment when she would cash out our 15 years together like a winning lottery ticket. I called my bank the next morning and froze our remaining joint accounts. By afternoon, Brett had filed emergency injunctions blocking any transfer of the beach house property. She can't sell what she doesn't own, Brett reminded me, sliding the trust documents across his desk. Her signature transferred full control to you. The irony is extraordinary. She signed away her rights to sell the very asset she's now trying to liquidate. That evening, my phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I answered but said nothing. Ethan? Her voice was tight, controlled. There seems to be some confusion with our accounts, and apparently there's an issue with the beach house closing. No confusion, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. The trust owns the house, not us, not you. A beat of silence. What trust? The one you signed the house into last year, page 12, section 4, paragraph 3 of those documents you were too busy to read. Her breathing changed. You tricked me. I laughed then, a sound so hollow it scared even me. No, Rachel, I protected what mattered to me, just like you protected what mattered to you. Ethan, be reasonable. I've had Brett pull all our financial records, I cut in. All $170,000 you've siphoned, the lease agreements in Savannah, the incorporation papers for MaxFit Studios, the property sale to Jason's brother at $350,000 below market value, it's all documented. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I trusted you with everything, Rachel, I finally said. But you forgot one critical detail about the man you married. I always read the fine print. I ended the call and walked to the deck railing, watching the tide roll in under the stars. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. The game had changed. She'd been playing checkers, thinking I was too blinded by love and work to notice her machinations. But I'd spent my life analyzing the moves others never saw coming. And I wasn't done yet. I returned to our home on Thursday evening after a carefully calculated move. Rachel wasn't expecting me. She thought I was at a 3-day conference in Atlanta. I pulled into the driveway, noticing the unfamiliar black Audi parked where my car usually sat. Jason's car. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted my key into the lock. The house smelled different, expensive cologne mingling with the scent of chilled champagne. I heard laughter from the kitchen, her laugh, the one that used to be mine. I moved silently through our home of 15 years, each step carrying the weight of 1,000 memories now tainted. The hardwood floors I'd installed myself during that sweltering summer of 9. The hallway where we'd hung photos of our travels, now conspicuously vacant on her side. When I reached the kitchen doorway, the scene froze my blood. Rachel and Jason sat at our marble island, champagne flutes between them, architectural plans spread across the counter, plans for my beach house. The contractor says we can knock out this wall entirely, Jason was saying, his finger tracing lines on the blueprint. Open up the whole space to the ocean view. Rachel's eyes sparkled with excitement. I've always wanted to. She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed me. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Ethan, she whispered. You're supposed to be in Atlanta. I stepped forward, calm and measured, placing my briefcase on the counter. Clearly. Jason straightened, his personal trainer physique tensing as if preparing for conflict. I almost laughed at the absurdity as if physical strength mattered in this particular battlefield. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, Rachel said, regaining some composure. No, I imagine not, I replied, opening my briefcase with deliberate slowness. Finding out about your affair? Or finding out about the theft of our savings? Or perhaps finding out about your plans to sell my beach house to Jason's brother at $350,000 below market value? Jason's eyes darted toward the door. Flight instinct kicking in. It's not theft when it's joint funds, Rachel countered, her lawyer's daughter instincts emerging. And we're married, the beach house is half mine. I withdrew the trust documents from my briefcase and placed them on the counter, careful not to disturb the champagne celebration. Page 12, section 4, paragraph 3, I said quietly. The property was transferred into the Morgan family trust last year, the trust that, according to your signature here. I flipped to the signature page, grants me sole authority as trustee. Rachel snatched the papers, her manicured nails flipping frantically through the pages. I watched her face transform as realization dawned, her own signature staring back at her, binding and irrefutable. You tricked me, she hissed. No, Rachel, I protected what was precious to me. There's a difference. Jason stood awkwardly, shifting his weight. I should go. By all means, I nodded toward the door. But before you leave, I'd strongly suggest you inform your brother to withdraw his fraudulent offer immediately, unless fraud charges are something your family finds appealing. His face paled as he backed away, leaving Rachel alone to face what she'd done. You can't do this, she whispered after the front door closed. It's already done, I replied, gathering the documents. The injunctions were filed yesterday, the accounts were frozen this morning, and Brett is preparing divorce papers as we speak. Rachel's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, though whether from loss or rage, I couldn't tell anymore. 15 years, Rachel, I said, my voice finally betraying emotion. 15 years, and you were willing to throw it all away for what? A fitness studio in Savannah? You were never there, she shouted suddenly. Always working, always analyzing your precious contracts. When was the last time you looked at me the way you look at your beach house? The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth. I had been absent, physically present, but emotionally distant. The beach house had become my sanctuary, my escape from a marriage that had been cooling by degrees. Maybe you're right, I conceded. Maybe I checked out first, but I never lied, I never stole, and I never conspired to take what wasn't mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel appeared. She was texting me while standing 6 feet away. You're bluffing about the trust, it read. My attorney will destroy this in court. I looked up from the phone to meet her eyes, seeing the woman I'd loved for 15 years transformed into a desperate stranger. I'm not bluffing, Rachel, I said quietly. I'm just finally playing the game you started. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. What happens now? She asked, sounding suddenly small and uncertain. I paused in the doorway, feeling the weight of endings and beginnings pressing on my chest. Now I go back to the beach house. I watch the tide come in, and you. I glanced back at her. You figure out how to start over with significantly less than you plan. As I walked out into the fading daylight, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction or vindication, but a strange, bittersweet freedom. Like a man who'd been carrying a burden for so long, he'd forgotten how to stand straight without it. I left that meeting feeling like a man who'd finally taken back control. But life is a way of delivering unexpected blows, even when you think you've seen all the cards. 3 days later, I was sitting at my beach house, watching the waves crash against the shore when my phone rang. It was Brett. Ethan, something's come up. Rachel's attorney requested an emergency meeting. They are claiming to have new evidence. My stomach tightened. What kind of evidence? They wouldn't say, just that it changes everything. I arrived at Brett's office the next morning to find Rachel already seated, her expression unreadable. Gone was the desperate woman from our kitchen confrontation. This Rachel looked confident. Her attorney, Maxwell Green, a shark in an expensive suit, smiled thinly as I took my seat. Mr. Morgan, thank you for joining us, he said, sliding a thick folder across the polished conference table. We've discovered some interesting information about the Morgan Family Trust. Brett reached for the folder, but I was faster. Inside was a document I'd never seen before, a trust amendment dated 2 years ago, bearing what appeared to be my signature. This is impossible, I whispered, staring at the paper. I never signed this. And yet there's your signature, notarized and witnessed, Maxwell replied smugly. This amendment grants Mrs. Morgan equal control as co-trustee, with explicit provision for utilizing trust assets for entrepreneurial ventures. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I'd been so careful, so meticulous. How could this exist? This is a forgery, Brett insisted, examining the document. Rachel leaned forward. Is it, Ethan? Remember that weekend in Naples 2 years ago? When you had that terrible migraine and I helped you sort through the stack of financial paperwork. You signed quite a few things that day. The memory flashed through my mind, me squinting through pain, Rachel bringing me documents one by one, explaining each one, guiding my hand. You wouldn't have. But even as I said it, I knew she had. I learned from the best, Rachel said quietly. You always said the details matter, Ethan, that most people don't read what they sign. This won't stand up in court, Brett interjected. We'll challenge the authenticity. By all means, Maxwell interrupted. But I should mention we've also submitted this to the state attorney's office, hiding assets during divorce proceedings, making false statements under oath about sole trusteeship. Those are serious offenses in Florida. I felt the blood drain from my face. All this time, I thought I'd been the one laying the perfect trap, but Rachel had been planning her countermove for years. What do you want? I finally asked. Rachel's eyes met mine not with hatred or triumph, but with something more complex. The same thing I wanted before all this ugliness, half the value of the beach house to start my business, that's it. And Jason? The question escaped before I could stop it. Jason was a symptom, Ethan, not the disease. Our marriage died long before he came along. I stared at the document that hadn't done all my careful planning. The master negotiator played at his own game. I'll need time to consider my options, I said finally. As I walked out into the bright Florida sunshine, I realized with crushing clarity that in my obsession with protecting what was mine, I'd completely missed seeing what was truly valuable until it was already gone. I sat in Brett's office a week later, staring at the amended trust document that had shattered my carefully constructed plans. The signature was undeniably mine, expertly extracted during a moment of vulnerability. Rachel had beaten me at my own game. We have options, Brett insisted, spreading documents across his desk. We can challenge the amendment, claim coercion, even pursue forgery charges if we can prove she misrepresented what you were signing. But something inside me had shifted. The burning need for victory that had fueled me these past months suddenly felt hollow. What's the simplest path forward? I asked. Brett looked surprised. Well, negotiating a settlement would avoid a protracted legal battle, but Ethan, she played you. You don't strike me as someone who walks away from that. I gazed out the window at the palm trees swaying in the breeze. I'm not walking away, I'm choosing my battles. 3 days later, Rachel and I sat across from each other without our attorneys, her suggestion surprising me. The conference room felt smaller somehow, the space between us charged with unspoken words. I never wanted it to go this way, she said, breaking the silence. But you were always so focused on winning, on controlling everything. The beach house became my only leverage. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but memories flashed and bidden Rachel trying to discuss renovation plans I dismissed, business ideas I'd patronizingly shut down, weekend trips cancelled for work emergencies that somehow never seemed that urgent in retrospect. When did we stop being partners? I asked quietly. Rachel's eyes met mine, surprise flickering across her face. Around the time you started treating me like an opponent instead of your wife. The truth of her words hit me with unexpected force. I'd been so obsessed with protecting what was mine that I'd forgotten the most valuable asset was the partnership we'd built together. I'll agree to sell the beach house, I said finally. We'll split the proceeds. You deserve the chance to build something of your own. Just like that. Her skepticism was warranted. With conditions, Jason stays out of the business, and you drop any potential claims against me for hiding assets. A month later, I stood on the deck of the beach house one last time, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sold sign flapped in the ocean breeze, $1.05 million, more than I'd expected. Rachel's half would fund her boutique fitness studio in Tampa, far from Jacksonville and the wreckage of our marriage. The night before closing, I'd found myself digging through old photo albums tucked away in the attic. There we were on the day we bought this place younger, smiling, Rachel pointing excitedly at the withered siding we planned to replace. It'll be perfect, she'd said, and I believed her. We'd spent that first night on air mattresses, drinking champagne on this very deck, mapping out our future under a blanket of stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, signed the lease today, thank you for making this possible. I typed back, you earned it, wishing you success. And I meant it. The strangest part was the weight that had lifted from my shoulders. The beach house had become a battleground, and now that the war was over, I felt lighter than I had in years. 6 months later, I drove past Rachel's studio during its grand opening. The parking lot was packed, a line of people stretching around the block. I didn't stop, but I smiled as I continued onto my new condo downtown, smaller, but with a view of the river that reminded me every morning that life flows on, carrying away old hurts if you let it. My attorney Brett called me that evening. Heard Rachel's place is taking off. Still think you made the right call? I watched the sunset paint the river gold and thought about the man I'd been so focused on winning that I'd forgotten what victory should feel like. Sometimes the most valuable asset isn't the one you can put on a balance sheet, I told him. It's knowing when to let go. Rachel and I speak occasionally now, brief, cordial conversations about practical matters. Last week, she mentioned that Jason was no longer in the picture. I didn't ask for details. Some chapters are better left closed. The other day, I found myself driving past our old beach house. The new owners had painted it a cheerful yellow, added a wraparound porch. Different, but beautiful in its own way. I didn't feel the sting I expected. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of closure. In property negotiations, I always taught my clients that sometimes walking away from one deal opens the door to something better. I just never expected that lesson to apply so personally. The beach house was just a house in the end. What matters is building something that can weather any storm, even if this something is just yourself. In property negotiations and in life, I learned that winning isn't always about defeating your opponent. Sometimes, true victory comes in letting go of what you thought mattered most. Those months fighting for the beach house had blinded me to what was truly valuable, not the property itself, but the peace that comes with choosing your battles wisely. The weight of resentment had been crushing me, turning me into someone I didn't recognize. As I watched the sunset paint the river gold from my downtown condo, I realized that what Rachel and I had wasn't destroyed by her betrayal or my counterattack. It had eroded long before, when we stopped seeing each other as partners and started viewing each other as adversaries. The most untouchable asset wasn't the beach house protected by legal documents. It was the ability to walk away with dignity, to find closure without destruction. In the quiet moments when the waves of anger subsided, I discovered something unexpected. Freedom feels a lot like forgiveness, not of her, but of myself, for all the battles I never needed to fight.